Hello, welcome to HEMA How To. In this video I'm going to show you how to make a boffer or foam sword. So I find these very useful for kids classes, for working with low equipment, for getting people used to fighting in groups, or when we just need to quickly move from one thing to another. The major advantages are it's cheap, so these cost less than $20 to put together, that's Australian. They are very good for getting people to actually practice striking as opposed to thrusting, as we would with steel generally. The other thing that's quite nice about them is that the stickiness of the tape means that they will actually often form a better bind than a plastic or nylon waster would. The tools and equipment you're going to need to make a boffer are a pool noodle, some PVC pipe. I use heavy-duty electrical conduit. There are plenty of other things that you could use, but this is fairly cheap and readily available. Some duct tape or PVC grey tape, and then you'll also need some differently coloured electrical tape. I've chosen black today, but it could be any colour you like. You'll need some filament tape or fibre tape. Like I said in previous videos, this is really handy stuff. It's quite nice to have a little doorstop that fits the end of your PVC pipe. Gives it a nice pomp. Some ordinary garden hose. And then the tools that you might want to use are a tape measure, a pair of scissors. I quite like using these clippers or shears for cutting the garden hose, but you could just about use anything, including just a sharp knife, as well as a saw. The first thing you're going to want to do is cut your pool noodle. What I like to do with pool noodles is measure them and then cut them exactly in half, and that way I get the best use out of both sides. I know where I'm going to cut it. And for this sort of job, I find a milk crate very handy, but you could use just about anything. You want to hold the piece in place with your foot, and then give it some nice even strokes with the saw. Holding both ends can be very helpful. It's a very quick job. Okay, so now that I've cut it in half, what I need to do is figure out exactly the length of PVC pipe that I need to put inside. Now the important thing with this is that I need to be able to use this to thrust, which means that the PVC pipe can't reach all the way to the end of the boffer. It has to finish a little bit before. So I like to give myself a bit of space, but not too much, because of course the further down you go, the more likely the boffer is to break. So I give it about a fist. The other thing that you have to make sure is you have to decide how much handle you want. Now my ideal is, generally speaking, to give myself enough room that I can comfortably just about put two hands on the guard or the grip, but maybe a little bit less so that it's very comfortable for one-handed use, or two, and that way it's a more versatile boffer. So what I'm doing is I'm checking the length here, getting that to about a fist away from the end, and then 1, 2 hands. That's pretty good. So I want to go to about there, because I have to allow some space for the crossguard as well. And there we go, pretty quick. Now that I've got the pool noodle and the PVC pipe cut to length, the next thing to do is create the crossguard. Generally speaking, with the crossguards on a boffer, what you want is to make the crossguard quite short. You can make it as long as you want. I like to make it about the length of my hand, like that. And that still gives me a nice, comfortable crossguard effect without being too in the way. And certainly, you want to make sure that if you are going to make it much longer than this, you might want to put some foam or something in, just in case people get a bit silly and get hit with them. So what you'll need is you'll actually need two of these, one for each side. So the next one should be as close as possible to the same size as this, so I just use this as a model. So I put it on top, and I figure out where it needs to go, and then I cut. So I've got two pieces that are almost exactly the same length. The next thing to do is take some of my filament tape, and I'm going to make a couple of small loops of this stuff. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting them side by side so they're exactly the same length, and I'm going to pin the ends together. And now what I can do, that I've got the crossguard made, is I can slide the PVC pipe and the crossguard together. It's actually really good if this is fairly tight, because you can make it into the size and shape that you want. Good, good. So we've got the crossguard exactly where we want it, and now we're going to take the crossguard together. To do this, what I like to do is start by making a good strong loop on the tube, because the tape sticks best to itself, not to anything else necessarily. And then I'm essentially tying a knot with tape, and I want to go over the work and around many times in order to attach it. And you can see there I'm making it kind of a cross shape. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go along the garden hose, closing up the gaps and covering everything. And you really can't use too much tape at this stage, so it's completely fine to just go wild. Okay, so those two parts are together. The next thing to do is attach my pommel, which is optional. You don't need one of these, but they're nice to have. They change the balance in a pleasant way, and this is just an ordinary chair leg stopper of the same diameter as your PVC pipe. So that's on, and that's just a friction fit, and I'll go over it with tape later. So now I get my pool noodle, and I want my cut end at the same end as the crossguard. So I'm going to slide the pool noodle on. Alright, now that this is attached, it's time to add the filament tape. The filament tape needs to reinforce the pool noodle on the outside, paying particular attention to the weakest parts and the parts that will receive the most damage. And that's particularly where the join is between the two parts. So the PVC pipe ends about there, and so we need extra filament tape here. We also need filament tape here over the handle to help hold in place the pommel, and filament tape to join the pool noodle to the handle. The fastest and easiest way to do this is with straight strips with just a little bit of overlap. For this part, I'm going to use a spiral wrap because it makes it much, much stronger. And again, the main thing is to cover the place where the empty pool noodle meets the PVC pipe, which is about there. So I'm going to cover from about there to about there because that's the weakest part of the bottom. Now that I've finished putting the filament tape on, it's time to do the duct tape. So it's not particularly important how you do this. The duct tape is not very structural. It's mainly to cover the previous tape and ensure that it doesn't wear out prematurely. So the main things to think about when you're doing this are to make sure that the end is covered, because that's the bit that's going to take the most wear. What I like to do in this case is actually do the end first. So now that I've done the end, I need to wrap this with a spiral wrap using my duct tape and completely cover everything. So in this case, it's best to actually start at the top and then work my way down. And I want to cover over my previous work so that none of the edges are exposed. When you're doing this, it can be tempting to pull the tape really tight, but it's important that it not be too tight because you don't want to compress the pool noodle. You want to keep it nice and springy and uncompressed. So when you're taping your boffer, you want to do this in a spiral, and it's easiest to do that if you lay the boffer on the surface and you're putting the handle out over the overhang in space, so that as you turn it, it's very easy. So I pull my tape, give myself lots of space, and then roll, looking for that overlap. And as I get further down the boffer, I don't need as much overlap because this part of the boffer just doesn't see as much wear and tear. So I'm reaching the end of the boffer now, and at this point it gets a little bit trickier, but the same principle continues. I want to cover my previous work. The main thing is to cover the majority of the fibre tape. So now that I've done the quilliams and the hilt, I can push that down with my fingers, and then I can work on the handle. And I'm going to do the handle in the same way I did the blade. I'm just going to spiral. This is where it can get a bit more tricky because I'm trying to make it as nice and tight and close as possible so that it's a comfortable feel for your hands. And I'm not doing a perfect job, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, now that we've finished putting the duct tape on this, it's time to add some electrical tape to give it the simulation of a blade. I'm going to use some black electrical tape, but it could be just about any colour you like. Feel free to improvise. You just want it to contrast reasonably strongly with the colour of your duct tape. So I'm going to use a single strip going from one side all the way along and down the other. This is one of the areas where you really want to take care to make sure that the quilliams and the blade actually match. It's not perfect, but it'll do. And that is how you make a buffer.